From the Basement, the only blockchain podcast that interviews the forgotten and downtrodden devs that actually do the work, hosted by me, Martin G. And this episode, we have the one and only André van der Heijden from Lamp 577, and we're going to talk about why B3i chose Corda over Hyperledger. Hi, André.
Hi, Martin. Glad to be here.
Great. So, a little bit of background about André. André started for his sins in SAP development. That's right. But we're going to blame that on the fact that he comes from Europe, and SAP is big in Europe. And then he went and became a data scientist in a consultancy, and then somehow he moved into a blockchain department of the same consultancy. And then for, was it 2 or 3 years, you worked for B3i, André?
Let's see, since the beginning, I think for 3.5 years actually. But I worked for a big insurance company, the biggest insurance company in the Netherlands. It's Achmea. So that's where I did my first, I first worked as an SAP consultant, then gradually became a data scientist, and then rolled into the blockchain world at Achmea, and later on as an independent contractor.
And Achmea were one of the B3i consortium insurance firms. They seconded you to B3i then?
Yeah, that's right. They were one of the 15 companies that founded B3i. And then I was still working full-time at Achmea. So I did like 50% data science stuff with computer vision and machine learning, lots of Python programming. And the other half I did blockchain development. And that's when I started to do blockchain development full-time. When I started working for B3i, when I was seconded from Achmea to B3i.
And obviously Marcus Tract was running that. Was running B3i at the time. Like, what made you go into B3i? Was it like, oh, we've got this opportunity, do you want to do it? Or did Marcus like tempt you in somehow?
It was still in the early beginning phase back then. I think this was 2017 early. The first involvement into B3i was, I think, a demo from Swiss Reinsurance. They had made their own prototype of some reinsurance application. And then we all joined in London, and then B3i was more and more founded. But in the beginning, we were me, another programmer, and then other companies also had their programmers. So guys from Germany, from Italy, from Ireland, and we were all working together. And back then, Marcus Trott wasn't the CTO. He was just one of the people trying to make this prototype a real thing. At that time, I was always doing 50-50 data science and blockchain development. And I had said for a long time that I would want to focus on one project and one project only, because I was always doing like 3 or 4 projects at the same time. Then I decided to go full on board with blockchain development.
What company do you work for today?
Today I work for Lab 577 and actually for SDX. So that's the SIX digital exchange.
What do you do there?
A whole bunch of Corda related stuff. So what did I do there? I did some hardening of the Corda contracts. I did some bug fixing, found some nasty multiple attachment bugs. And now I made a dashboard to monitor the pipeline results and how we can improve the pipeline success rates.
How old were you when you started programming?
I was about 15, I think.
What was your first language?
I'm pretty much ashamed of it, but it was probably Macromedia Flash.
Flash? You writing games?
No, I made an entire website in Flash. I just found out how to do it, and then you put like one part of the website in the first frame, and then another part at frame 5, another part at frame 10, and then you made a menu that could switch from frame 1 to frame 5 to frame 10, and then you had sort of a dynamic website.
Now, I have to say, I mean, we can see real career progression here. You know, you started off in Flash, you then upgraded to SAP.
You can call that.
And then you went into Java, I guess, with Hyperledger, and then Kotlin with.
Yeah.
I mean, that is progression, isn't it?
Sort of that. I always joked that at SAP they have one guy who does UX, and that he died in the 80s.
Probably true. Where did you go to uni and what did you study?
I went to Tilburg University and I studied a Bachelor in Business Studies and a Master in Accounting and Control.
When did you start to work in software?
Let's see. It was when I was 25, I think.
Which industry have you spent most of your career in?
In insurances.
What's your operating system of choice?
That's Mac OS. And currently Ubuntu. That's fine as well. But as long as it's not Windows, then it's cool.
What's your programming language of choice?
Kotlin for sure. I think Python as a second.
Yeah, Kotlin is definitely a popular choice. When was the last time you wrote some code, and what did it do?
That was actually just before we joined the call. Then I investigated some issues with authorization of how you log into the Corda node in our use case. And then I found the issue and wrote some small piece of code and pushed that to the code base, and now it's solved.
There you go. See, from the basement, it really is the only blockchain podcast that does actually interview developers. What's your favorite music to listen to whilst you code?
Mostly some techno or minimal music, something without a whole lot of lyrics. Also sometimes some metal or some hard rock, some Metallica or what's it called, Motorhead.
Name one skill all programmers should have.
You have to be a self-starter. Like you have to be a bit of an autodidact, that you can learn things for yourself, find it out for yourself, watch YouTube videos, find out some stuff on the internet, and then ask questions.
Is Agile a force for good or for bad?
That's always a politically heavy question, right? I'm not so much a process guy. I'm more of a guy that likes to get things done. And then I think progress is far more important than the process of how you get there.
Do you, or have you ever owned any Bitcoin?
Not Bitcoin, but I do own some Ethereum and some Neo and some Monero. Yeah, Monero. Yeah. Well, I was too late to get into it. It's not that I made a ton of money. It's more that I lost a bit of money.
How long have you been using Corda for?
I think for 3 years or so, 3.5 years maybe.
Why did you get into Corda?
Basically because I was working at B3i. We built our initial application on Hyperledger Fabric, and then we moved into Corda, and that's when I started learning it.
What's the best thing about Corda?
I think it has a good level of abstraction. So like the very deep under the hood kind of plumbing is abstracted away from the developers, so you don't have to do everything for yourself. On a broader level, it's very developer friendly, I think. Documentation is really good. You can set up a test network very easily with some lines of code. You can debug it easily. And together with the documentation and the good level of abstractions, you can be very productive with it, I think.
Right. What's the worst thing about Corda?
I think it's pretty technical, but the missing dependency mechanism, that's still a bit of a weakness. When the dependency is missing, then the Corda source code goes and looks for it. And the way it does that is not always, I don't find it always coherent or what you would expect.
There you go. R3, if you're listening, that's what you need to fix. What is your favorite Corda open source library?
I think at the moment the token SDK. I know that a lot of people have mentioned that, and it is pretty good. It does what it needs to do, and it's a very useful library.
It's pretty popular. And finally, what is the best place to start learning Corda?
Yeah, just by doing it yourself, just getting started with the template and write a simple Cordapps. I think that's the best way. And the documentation is really good with the videos that you can watch.
Yeah, the boot camp, the online boot camp on YouTube. Right, let's crack on with finding out what happened at B3i when they decided to drop Hyperledger. So we've already covered how you joined B3i in 2016 and they started off using Hyperledger, and Corda had approached B3i, but you said, no, we're going to go with Hyperledger for now. So do you want to set the scene and just tell us what we're trying to do with these blockchain systems at B3i?
What we wanted to do was develop like a platform for the insurance industry, on which you could deploy all kinds of insurance and reinsurance applications. So our launch application was a reinsurance application. You must imagine that, for example, if you have like tons of greenhouses in the Netherlands, then it's a big portfolio of all these greenhouses. And if a hailstorm comes, for example, then this can result in 100 millions of like hundreds of millions of damages. And then the Dutch insurance companies, they can't pay for that by themselves. They would go bankrupt. So they insure that bit with large reinsurance companies, mainly based in Zurich, for example, but also in Munich. And these were also part of the B3i consortium. So one of the use cases was to put the contracts that form the basis for these kinds of transactions on blockchain, because that was mostly done via Excel sheets and making lots of phone calls and sending faxes around. And we wanted to digitalize that and also to have this like in one distributed ledger, so that you have one single version of the truth, and you could save a lot of throughput time and save on the amount of time that funds had to be locked, and reduce FX risks. And then we built an entire platform. So that was one of the applications, but it was also envisioned that the platform will be used for consumer-facing insurance applications and all kinds of other business-to-business insurance and reinsurance applications. And we were trying to capture these in software and in a DLT native way.
So were you guys, I mean, like, had anybody already done that? Because it seems to me like with insurance, the one thing they haven't done is really digitize the process, right? And then after digitalization, Mike, you could put in blockchain. Were you trying to do both at the same time effectively?
Yeah, I think we were trying to do both at the same time. And that's also where the strength lie. Because we made a really good UI and also a really solid data model that could support multiple use cases and also for the future. Like our first application was this reinsurance use case, but it should also be able to support a consumer-facing insurance app, just a simple car insurance app. It should always also be able to support that in the future.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. And I don't think there are many outfits that stack up to how B3i are trying to kind of really leapfrog, you know, a stage in technology advancement. And it's the kind of thing you normally see in the third world, right? Where, you know, they just go from having nothing to having a smartphone, you know, that kind of, you know, technological leap.
Yeah. And there were already like standards. There's a big standards body, Accord. Yeah, they made the Accord data model. And in the beginning, they've been busy with this data model for the last 60 years or so, I think.
Right.
But it's not used everywhere in practice. And still each insurance company and reinsurance company uses their own version and their own data model. And now when we build everything on DLT, then of course it has to be the same code base, the same data model, because then all these objects are interchangeable and you have data standards. So aside from all the DLT benefits, you also get the benefit of having a shared data model that's used by everybody. So also for analytics, you can do much more, because then you define what's an insurance policy, and then you can do all kinds of aggregations and analysis and then draw conclusions far more easily.
So you picked Hyperledger, yeah? Just in a nutshell, at the time, why did you pick Hyperledger?
Let's see. Back at the time, it was beginning 2017. We came together as a group, and then we made this giant scorecard and defined all the criteria that we wanted our software solution and the partner that we would want to build it with. Just what we would find important. And on the basis of that, we sent out multiple requests for proposals to various companies. And in the end, 3 companies demoed to us. And one of them was IBM with Hyperledger Fabric. We found that to be the best solution. I think, because it was open source for sure. Also because we had the ability to develop it like in a joint effort with IBM. So we delivered 50% of the development capacity, and IBM did as well. So we had a joint team that was quite good and allowed us to learn a lot as well. We always wanted it to be like a permission network where our members controlled their own nodes and that we could guarantee the privacy of certain transactions between members. So that was really important for us.
So these days, when it comes to a private DLT, private blockchain system, I think of it as being like a two-horse race, Corda, Hyperledger. But I think in 2017, a year after B3i had started with Hyperledger, I think you still very much had Quorum in the mix, and of course you've got the Ethereum Enterprise Edition. I mean, which ones were you looking at?
I think at the time there was one group of companies that wanted to work with Eris, which was a private Ethereum implementation at the time. After that, it became part of the Hyperledger group. It was founded by Casey Kuhlman.
Oh.
Yeah, he was the CEO. Nice guy. He has actually been a sniper in the Iraqi war.
No way.
Apparently, he was there when the statue of Saddam Hussein got pulled from its base.
No way.
And he had a law background, and after that he founded Eris, which after that became Monex. And we used it at Achmea to do our first blockchain endeavor, building a peer-to-peer insurance platform.
I know Silas Davis, but nobody seems to know him.
I don't know him either.
You don't know him either. He's the CTO of Monex.
Oh, okay. Cool. But yeah, those were this was one of the contenders. Monex.
So the contenders were
Monex, yeah, and then I think also the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance was the third contender. And they all gave demos to us, and we judged every one of those demos on their merits based on the balanced scorecard that we had set up beforehand. And then IBM with Hyperledger was just a clear winner for us at the time.
Okay, and then you went, and then you did that for a year. So what happened? What made you decide to rethink that choice after 1 year in to the journey?
From what I remember at the time, we were always looking to build in privacy while still having some public parts. So, for example, when you have all these deals between insurance companies and reinsurance companies, then some parts can be public, like the master data, the data about the companies themselves and about some parts of the deals, but not if you make a deal between party A and B, then you still want to have the ability to shield that from party C. And I think at the time we were looking to incorporate that into Hyperledger Fabric, but it was always difficult to do this. And then they had this feature called channels, which they were implementing at the time, but it took quite long to implement that. And at least I always had the feeling that, when we looked at what Corda was doing, that they were right in the direction where we wanted Hyperledger Fabric to move. And more it began to feel that Corda was actually one step ahead of what we actually wanted, and Hyperledger Fabric was more following.
And so what happened?
I think that this must have been end of 2017, that one of the developers at B3i, he gave a presentation about Corda. He was a seasoned Java programmer, and he got more and more knowledge about Corda, and he just presented to us what it could do. And that was a really great presentation. I think I can say this is our current head of engineering at B3i. It was Stephen Houston, and he made this presentation. I still remember the title. It was Sprechen Sie Corda. And he explained all this stuff about Corda and the benefits it could have, and why we should try it out at least. And then he started building a small proof of concept in which he built a pretty large part of what we had done up to that point, but then in Corda, using the Corda flow framework and the Corda governing contracts. And then he showed it to us, and then it became really interested, and it sort of got the ball rolling for real.
And what was the feeling? Were you guys like, damn, I just spent a year going down the wrong path, or was it one of like relief?
No, it was. I think it was a very much a mixed feeling, because I know at the time, in the beginning, I was very much convinced of Hyperledger Fabric because I'd worked with it such a long time. I've worked together with the IBM people, and for me it worked. And if it didn't work, then we made it work. So I was also personally invested. But the more and more we started comparing Corda, and the more we saw what it could do, and the more also that Steven showed us what it could do by making this proof of concept. We just objectively looked at both techniques at that time, and then Corda became the clear winner for us. Yeah, like the developer experience, the way you can debug your code, the way you can set up your test network, the way it handles privacy. Like right off the bat, it handles privacy the right way for us. Whereas Hyperledger Fabric always felt to us like, okay, we share everything, that's our default. And then afterwards we try to put a fence around the things that we don't want to share. And it felt a bit artificial and just not the right way to go. And that's why Corda, yeah, in that aspect also was clearly better.
And so in a nutshell then, it sounds like the key points for deciding to switch to Corda after having already started with Hyperledger Fabric were the privacy by default, the developer experience, the Corda flow framework, and the Corda governing contracts. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. And for example, yeah, some things you can call like the developer experience, or just that it's inherently well developed and therefore it's logical and therefore everybody can understand it better.
Would you say were there any regrets? Was it some things lost and some things gained?
Yeah, it was a whole new paradigm, because aside from using Corda or Hyperledger, when we started using Corda, we also started using Spring Boot as an API between the UI and Corda itself. So that was a whole new way of working, because before that we had a Node.js implementation. It was just entirely different, because the Hyperledger Fabric application was programmed in Go, and at the time it was really difficult to debug. So when we went to Corda, it became a Kotlin implementation, was object oriented, was much more easy to find the business logic and where it would belong. So I don't think I had much regrets. At the time, I did have to regret that we split up the team, for sure, because we had been working with a lot of people from IBM, and it was really a great team, and we really bonded. So I did miss that a lot. Seeing all of a sudden not seeing those guys anymore. So that was a shame. Yeah.
Well, that is a great compliment for IBM, isn't it? And the developers they've got there, right?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
And they kind of relates to that, but also different. Like, is there anything you would change about Corda?
I think the notaries are still a bit of they can be a bit of a weak point, and always something that people who come from Ethereum, they can't really get used to, because it feels like a bit of a vulnerability to them. Yeah, so if you could summarize that, one downside of Corda could be that it really lends itself for like a group of companies to use blockchain technology, but actually not really use it for what it's meant to be used for. But I also did some mentoring with starting Corda companies, and oftentimes I get the impression that they just use Corda because they heard about it, because it's blockchain, because they can get funding more easily, or that they have access to this great network of other companies that are using it. And then they just want to run one single node of Corda and then just develop with it. And that's strange, of course, because then it's not a distributed network at all. So
they want a web app.
Yeah, they basically want a web app. They want it to be a blockchain because it sounds good, and because their investors will like it. Yeah.
So is Corda a silver bullet then? Is Corda always a better choice than Hyperledger Fabric?
No, I don't think so, because if you have an application in which you want actually all participants to get most of the information, so you want to broadcast it to everybody, then it's better to have either a public blockchain or like a blockchain like Hyperledger Fabric, in which you can broadcast it to all the peers. I think actually then a public blockchain would be far superior. If you want to share it only on a need-to-know basis, then Corda is way better.
So what would you say to someone who was using Hyperledger Fabric at the moment, but actually what they really needed was the privacy.
I would say to them, give me a call and explain your use case to me, and I can discuss with you if you really need to stay on Hyperledger Fabric or that you would be better off with Corda. Because it could be that you have built an entire application over the course of a few months and made something really beautiful and it works well. But still, if you would be like 50% faster on Corda and can find bugs more easily, debug more easily, start a test network more easily, then in the long run, you would be far better off.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you, André. I think that's a great place to end it on. What a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for your time today.
Likewise. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter to catch future episodes, and all previous episodes can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. This cunning little show was devised by yours truly, Martin G. Esquire, cajoled into Sense and Sensibility by Tess Shepherd-Smith, and then published by my imaginatively indemnified arch-nepotism Oscar Bennett, all the way from the basement.